I started teaching storytelling as a skill in 2016. And when I look back that journey, right, it's been about almost 10 years now. Generally, what I would say is I've reduced my content. You might think it's the other way around, right? No, I'm adding more, adding more, adding more. But over a period of time, I've actually realized that the idea is not to share everything that you know in the 2 days that you have with the team, but to leave them with the most two or three big ideas.
Welcome, Ravi. Welcome to SignalQuest with BVHK.
Thank you so much, Harish. Thanks for having me. This sounds like a very exciting project.
It is definitely exciting for me, and if not exciting, it is interesting for all my guests as well. That's the hope. Let's get started, Ravi. Straight off the bat, I'm sure it's not an easy question to start with, but you spent years in consulting, social sector, and even built a startup around storytelling before you happened on story rules. Let me give you the opportunity to tell me whether it was happened or was it deliberate. But before arriving at story rules, you went through a long journey. So what's the most counterintuitive thing that you've discovered about what works in business storytelling?
Yeah, that is a counterintuitive question and a cool way to start, Harish. Yeah, I did stumble into the world of storytelling. I think I would agree with that. But I'm glad for all the experiences before. I think all of those were stepping stones. Not all of them planned, but all of them helped me to reach where I reached, right? And of those stepping stones, I think the 7 year consulting stint was probably one of the most important ones that I worked in a small boutique firm called Feedback Infra. And I think that is probably where I had a very counterintuitive lesson, which even now I'm learning in a way, right? To give the lesson upfront, as I say, bottom line upfront is the lesson for me is less is more. It seems cliched, it seems trite almost at, yeah, we have heard this, Ravi, it's fine. But I think everybody has to go through that journey of trying to share a lot, trying to overshare, trying to overanalyze, over communicate, and then realize that, oh, that there is a simplicity on the other end of complexity, and that's where I need to reach. In fact, that's a lovely quote that I've used in the book also, where somebody says that I don't care for the simplicity on this side of complexity, but I would give my life for the simplicity on the other side of complexity. So we tend to feel that the more in depth, the more complicated information we have, the better it is. And I used to have that pride in my consulting slides, right? When clients would come to us with problems, should we acquire this company? Should we enter this market? We would drown them with information, right? And we would pride on saying, hey, we are the depth guys. All these other guys in consulting, they don't go deep. We have, when they have 2 conversations, we have 20. If they speak to 5, research, we will speak to 50 and so on, right? And yeah, the depth is important, but drowning people in depth is not a good thing. And that's when I think through conversations, through some client feedback, I realized that leaving out strategically and editing out stuff that may have taken you a lot of time, but doesn't add value to the story, doesn't take the story forward, is an important skill. And it's not something that you completely start using all the time, right? So in my storytelling itself, I think I've been doing it for quite some time. But in my teaching, I had one more way when I learned that, Harish. So this was I started teaching storytelling as a skill in 2016. And when I look back that journey, right, it's been about almost 10 years now. Generally, what I would say is I've reduced my content. You might think it's the other way around, right? No, I'm adding more, adding more, adding more. But over a period of time, I've actually realized that the idea is not to share everything that you know in the 2 days that you have with the team, but to leave them with the most two or three big ideas, get them to practice more, go more in depth on those, and then actually carry those on an ongoing basis rather than saying, oh, here are 10 mind blowing ideas that I will expose you to in 2 days, but you will clean forget after the third day, right? So I think, yeah, so across multiple, I think, avenues of life, I've realized about this has been counterintuitive for me.
Yeah. So when you speak about this, Ravi, is it like a rite of passage that one has to go through before you realize the beauty of this?
I would think so. I mean, I it's amazing if somebody can do it without going through this rite of passage. But I think it's important to go through that struggle, to go through that period of saying, no, I want to share everything. And I don't can't fathom a world in which a person will directly reach the other end of the simplicity on the other end of complexity. So I think it is probably a rite of passage.
So when you are teaching, your course to people, and you see a younger Ravi on the other side, right, who's trying to build these slides with a lot of data, a lot of insights. How do you deal with that situation? Do you feel like, oh, this is good? Take at least 2 or 3 more years before he actually realizes the beauty of this, or do you struggle? Oh, I went through this. Why don't you learn this earlier? How do you handle that situation?
No, there's a smile always, Harish. Yeah, it's like I feel a lot of empathy, a lot of weird sense of happiness. Yeah, I've been there. Don't worry. Yeah, and I know that the reaction that those guys will sometimes have is, no, Ravi, you don't realize. I need to show all of this, right? And it's almost that pride, that sense of, no, Ravi, you don't know our situation. This is how it is. To kind of, and I sometimes struggle. It's not easy for me also to kind of tell them, yes, I've been there. I was you at one point in time. And not always I succeed at the end of those 2 days, but more often than not in the workshop, my job is to try and get them to at least see that, hey, it is better. If not for their own information, Harish, the magic sometimes happens is, let's say you and I are part of the workshop, right? So I will struggle to see it with my data. But when you present a simpler version of your story, right? I'm like, oh, I like the simpler version better. So then it's easier for me to connect that to say, hey, maybe others also like my simpler version better, right? So yeah, so it's a tough journey, but it's important to try and reach.
Yeah. So I will, in turn give you a story. So this is from the 2003 World Cup final, right? So I was on campus when this was happening. If you remember, we were playing Rahul Dravid as a keeper, and I think Kumble was not playing. Basically, we had an extended batting lineup, right?
Right. This was in South Africa versus
This
Australia.
was this was in South Africa, right? And there was a rain delay, so there were some overs that were lost because of rain, and they were still trying to calculate, the DLS target for India, because India was chasing their lost Sachin Tendulkar in the first over, going for a shot against McGraw and all of that. So I was reading up about the Duckworth-Lewis system, and what I realized then was that they actually use a way of putting some score against batters and bowlers and keepers, and one keeper, right? So I think the way it is done is 6 batters, 4 bowlers, and one keeper, and all of that, right? So I said, there is a flaw in this, because Dravid is actually a proper
Proper
batsman,
batter, yeah.
right? So we actually have a better chance because we are batting second. So I fished out the email IDs of Frank Duckworth and Tony Lewis and sent out an email to them
Wow.
while the match was going on. Right, this was there was a rain break, so I was, I think, furiously following on ESPN Cricket Info, and I sent out this email, and I actually got a reply from Frank Duckworth. Okay,
Incredible.
so Duckworth said, "You are absolutely right, but if we add all these calculations, it just becomes very difficult for people to do these calculations and understand this concept. And they have to do these calculations runtime while a match is going on, for both the match officials and for the captains." And that South Africa fiasco had happened in the World Cup, in the same World Cup earlier, right? So he said, in the interest of simplicity, we are accepting this flaw slash limitation, and we are going ahead and sort of using this this law, right? So that was a big lesson for me. That was, he's saying that, yeah, I understand this is not perfect, and like you said, again, our desire is to be as perfect as possible, consider all possible scenarios, drown the audience in all the conditions, saying ye hoga to wo hoga, isme aisa karna hai. But then it's just lost, message is lost, right?
Yeah.
So that was my first introduction to the concept of simplicity.
Your
So
rite of
I'll
passage.
share that story with you.
I think that was right, your rite of passage, as it were. So, and I think it is important to go through that. So, I'm actually very happy when I see somebody go through that level of detail and complexity, right? Because it's a good journey, and the simplicity at the other end of it will be sweet.
Yeah. And you mentioned your book, Ravi. Congratulations.
Thank you.
It's a
Thank you.
fantastic book. I've been going through that. I've removed the cover of this because I've been carrying it everywhere. So you can see the cover, actual cover in, behind Ravi
Yeah,
there.
or here it's
Yes.
with me.
So you put together a fantastic sort of list of 31 ideas, right? 31 storytelling techniques. I'm going to put in the spot here. So if you had to pick only three of those 31 and say that, this is it. Out of these 31, these are the top three or the ones that you want to, live by, die by. Which are those three techniques?
So which are the three favorite children among the 31 that I have? Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, no. So before I kind of share what might be three, the reason I've written 31 storytelling techniques is the word storytelling technique itself gives you a hint that it's not only stories, right? Many people think, oh, is that 31 stories? No, it's not 31 stories. These are all techniques or tools that people can use to make communication better, right? And some of them may feature stories, some of them may not really. It may just be a chart. A chart is a storytelling technique for me. The use of humor is a storytelling technique, and so on. So depending upon the audience or context, you will have to choose and pick what works better, right? So the right answer to this question is like a very typical consulting answer. It depends on the audience and the context. But for me, the three that I end up using a lot more, when I see in daily life, in my LinkedIn posts, in my teaching, when I'm teaching also, I'm using storytelling techniques. I think the one ring to rule them all, the one technique to rule them all for me is the technique in chapter number 5, which I've christened as 139 stories fine. And it's basically a way to think of your entire story narrative on paper, maybe ideally on a one page, as a one sentence summary, as a 3 sentence summary, as a 9 sentence summary. And that symmetry, that rule of three really brings it tight together. And I've used that to some extent to write the book. I use that to create my slides, emails, everything, right? It's a technique that I've I've known. I got to know through a person called Sriram Subramaniam about the pyramid principle. It's basically based off the pyramid principle. And something that I use a lot. I highly recommend and encourage others also to use it. In my workshops, it's essentially, I could call my workshop the 139 workshop, but I build it around other things also. That's the engine of what I teach, right? So I think that's number one. Another one that I use a lot is techniques around curiosity. So, if you look at the book, it's divided into 4 rules: rules to make the audience understand, rule to make them pay attention and remember, a rule to make them care, and a rules to make them trust. So, the pay attention and remember part is very important because people are just inundated with information all the time, right? And they don't really they lose attention very quickly. So, if you make them curious, then they are giving you their attention of their own volition, right? So I think it's a very powerful tool. And in curiosity itself, there's a sub rule where I've got about 4 chapters. And for me, the one that works really well is asking smart questions. And that is something that you are very, very well versed with, Harish, because as a quizzer, you know it in your bones how to frame a right question. I wish more people learned that skill. It's not a skill that comes very naturally. When people sometimes when I tell them, hey, you must ask a good question, they might ask some random question that, what do you think was a performance was? Right? That's a bad question, right? So you have to really give some context, frame the question well, and the answer should come as a aha, think, oh, I should have guessed it. Oh, but it's surprising. So that balance is very important. That's number 2. Number 3 was multiple things are there. I like a little bit of humor. I like the emotion part, but I think analogies would be my number 3 go-to technique. And I try and do that also in real life a lot. That when I'm trying to explain something to someone, I'll always try and build a bridge between saying that what it is versus what you must do. Like, for example, just yesterday, I was doing a session with, of all people, a bunch of doctors, right? And I was trying to tell them how can they use storytelling techniques to communicate better with patients. There were about 300 doctors in an interesting platform. And so I was telling them sometimes, you may have to give a difficult message to an audience. But here is a small framework that you can use to make that message, go through in a simple and clear way. You tell them what is the challenge, why they should not worry about it, why is it happening, and what should they do next, right? So somewhat a simple framework. And then the analogy I used was like, just as you sugarcoat a medicine, similarly, if you have a slightly, bitter news to give, maybe you can just sugarcoat it with some empathy and make sure that it goes through, right? So, yeah, I mean, it's not needed all the time, but sometimes it's just easier way for somebody to understand an idea from if you make it relatable in their terms, right? So yeah, so those three, 139, curiosity, and analogies would be the three that I use a lot.
Right, brilliant. And you did the 139 workshop with us in this very room, so I understand the value of that 139 workshop as well. Help bring a lot of clarity to us as well. So I can vouch for that 139 way of looking at things, right? When you spoke about curiosity and 139 and analogy, something that struck me from what the Heath brothers wrote about in their book, The Epic Power of Moments, right? Where they have this epic framework where they again talk about this insight. What makes some moments epic is that, you stumble upon something. If I tell you that upfront, you won't, feel the same, aha moment, and you have to be sort of shepherded through a jungle, and then suddenly that light bulb goes off, and then you say, "Wow!" That's when you don't forget things easily. So for storytelling in general, right? For all the frameworks that you have learned, did you ever have that single specific moment where, oh yes, storytelling is what really gets me going. This is what I'm meant to do. Did that ever happen for you?
Yeah, there have been a few moments, right? And not all of them have been like an insight aha moment. Maybe one has been, right? So um, this was right after or night. Just as I was trying to do two things at the same time. This is about 2015. I had worked for 7 years from 2005 to about 11, 12 in consulting, 3 years in a non-profit. And then after that, we had just started our startup called Captivator to try and tell the stories of monuments, historical monuments in India like Qutub Minar, Taj Mahal, through a mobile app, right? And the idea was tourists who come down to India can, download the app and then they will get to know the stories of a Qutub Minar or a Red Fort or a Taj Mahal as they go point by point, right? And my job was the writing and a little bit of sales later. And so what I would do is go through the history of, okay, Shah Jahan and why did he build the Taj Mahal and what did he do and what were some interesting, surprising things about the architecture of it, about the politics about the whole time, the people equations and so on. And I was basically reading history, but trying to make it interesting while staying accurate, right? By using the right sources. So I was doing this. And I did about like 9 or 10 tours. And I realized that I can't be the bottleneck writing every tour. So we need to now get others also to write and maybe even get some people from a history background. But the problem with some of them was they would write it from a very dull, slightly boring history textbook kind of a way, right? So we had to make it also interesting for a layperson audience. So I started to write down a 1 page, 2 page document to say what techniques do you try and keep in mind when reading history and how do you make it interesting. So I started writing them down, look for human stories, look for analogies, look for connections, look for the surprise moments, etc. And so I was writing them. At the same time, this was about 2015, 16. I realized that this is not going to pay my bills, right? Captivator was very, very nascent and it's not earning much revenue. So I needed to do something to earn on the side. And so I came across this person called Sriram Subramanian who does trainings in Pune. And I had actually gone to him to raise funding for Captivator. Thankfully, that didn't happen. But when I realized that he does corporate trainings, I said, hey, can I, join you and can I do some trainings for you? He said, yeah, sure, come on. And I started doing something on the side. I did one for ICICI Bank, one for a global GCC in Bangalore. And I was teaching basically analytics people and, various other functional leaders. How do they tell the story of their data in a better way? So now I don't remember the exact point and spot, and I should maybe, commemorate that point and spot. But the aha moment for me was, oh my God, the techniques I'm using to make history interesting are exactly the same techniques that I'm teaching people who are analytics leaders or people writing loan applications in ICICI Bank and so on, right? And so that like blew me away. And still that time, Harish, I used to think that I'm a history buff But that day I realized I'm a storytelling buff. It doesn't matter. Like you tell me a great story with science, like a Bill Bryson, I would love that. You tell me a great story with, politics or the Shekhar Gupta, I'd love it. Harsha Bhogle on sports, I love it. Right. So that like opened my mind and realized that, I don't have to compartmentalize saying that, I'm only a history buff. I'm a storytelling buff. Right. And so that insight and I mean, it's one of those where it's there, it's deeply part of you knows, subconscious knows that it is true, but my prefrontal cortex also kind of knew that day that this is it. Okay, so maybe that was the biggest insight that I've still sustaining me now.
Okay, nice. So, a follow-up question from there, Ravi. Is there a definition of story that you believe in, or you define stories in a certain way?
So I split the definition of stories and storytelling techniques. Let me try and attempt for both. For me, a story is essentially an account of a problem being solved, right? So if you really step back to reasonably basic philosophical, considerations, right? Why are humans there on earth? We have all the unlimited desires and we're here to solve our desires, right? To meet our desires. And you have Maslow's hierarchy and all of that. On the one hand, we are constantly trying to meet our desires of basic desires and higher end desires and all of that. The parallel thing that humanity has been doing for the longest time is telling how did someone solve their desire or what you need to do to solve your desire. If you want to avoid being eaten by a tiger, don't go to that part of the forest. Must have been one of the earliest stories ever told. And what is that story? It's basically giving you a lesson that don't do this or do this. So it's usually at the, if you use an engineering approach, a story is an if then statement. If this happens, then do this, right? So, which is why all the morals of the story, right? That if you are faced with a situation of a very, very evil king with 10 heads, then, be brave, assemble an army and fight him and you will win, right? So that's the if then statement of Ramayana, and we are appropriately recording this on Dasera. And so, at some level, every point that we're making, right? Even if I'm making a presentation about my company to an investor, so then to the investor, I'm saying, if you want to make enough money, then invest in my story, invest in my company because it will give you the returns, right? If you want to improve the customer satisfaction, then let us invest in this software or this cloud program. So at the end of the day, that's what we are doing. So good story is one that does a really good job of convincing the audience of that if then statement, right? So to me, that is what a story is. The storytelling technique is a subset for me, and it's essentially a tool or a technique that you use, an approach that you use to make your point go through to your audience more effectively. And there are multiple goals that a storytelling technique tries to meet, and we can go deeper into that. But I'll halt there and let you respond on on both of these ideas.
Right. So, when you talk about the story being an account of an if then situation, do you necessarily assume that there is a conflict there, or there are if then stories which need not have a conflict as well? And does that then make it a boring story?
Yeah, I mean, it has to have some problem and solution, right? And conflict is a more fancier term for problem.
Hmm.
Problem is a more fancier term for desire. So yeah, whatever name we call it, yeah, if I just tell you that the the weather is cold today, right? That is not a story at all in any way, right? It's just a statement of fact, right? But if I tell you that it's likely to be cold, and last time I went out without my rain jacket, I got a cold, and I had to suffer and I had to miss my training. Right now, that is a story because in without even telling you, I'm telling you that take your jacket when you go outside, right? So if it is becoming cold outside, then you must carry your jacket is the subliminal, the underlying subtext of my message. And I can actually see that very, very clearly also, but that makes it more of a story than just saying that it's cold today.
Okay. So, would you then put the problem in the storytelling techniques part? because I may just be able to convey, for example, you're talking about, improving customer satisfaction scores, right? If you do this, if your agent, speaks in a warm tone, your customer satisfaction score will go up, is what I have to make as a point. Now the problem is that there are only few people who are, trying to serve all these, customer support calls. So increase the number of agents, improve the intelligence that they have on their screen when they're talking to all those people. These are all things that go under the storytelling techniques for me to make that basic if then statement. Is that what you're saying?
This is the core narrative that you're building, right? This might come in your 139, that you have a problem, you have a solution, and you have a next step kind of a thing. But a storytelling technique here might be that when you're saying that you have too little agents, right, and they're not, and your customer satisfaction is not good, a technique here might be, can you show me how it is not good? So use norm and variance to say that, hey, your customer satisfaction metric, let's call it an NPS, right, is currently at 80. I don't know whether that's good or bad. So norm variance will tell you what was it 3 months back, what was it 6 months back. Okay, good. Maybe you realize that it was 85 or 90. That itself may not tell you much unless you look at norms from outside your industry or other comparable industries, and then say others are actually maintaining NPS or they're going up. Now that tells you better. So that's a storytelling technique that I've used, which is the use of norm and variance, to make that point across more forcibly to you. Another technique I can use to make that point more forcibly is, let me tell you the story of one customer who, and here is the interaction, and he reached out, and here is what your the customer service official did, and he made them hold for a long time, and he did not have the answer, and he said, I'm going to now pass it on to somebody else, and the customer is very unhappy. And the actual recording of that person, the voice tone, the concrete visual of the customer getting angry, that's another storytelling technique. So you can use these multiple techniques to improve the impact of the core narrative. The core narrative is using 139, right? That hey, if you don't do this, you will have this. So that if then is the backbone, which is why I call it the story spine. You have to build some of these things on top of that spine to get that point across in a more powerful way.
Okay, okay, got it. We hear about all the hero's journey, and there's so many of these techniques. Act one, act two. We heard Niranjan speak about it in the Not session that you missed out on. Sometimes these techniques seem like, oh, these will be great for a play or a storybook that I'm writing. Now I can see that, oh, a Lagan is very similar to a Star Wars and a Sholay. At the heart of it, it's the same framework and all of that. But this is a pitch that I need to make to increase my budget for my department. I don't see how I can fit all of those things into my business proposal review that I'm going to present now. Is this a pushback that you hear often? And if yes, then what's your response to this?
This is another good example, Harish, of that less is more. Right. So for me, I used to do this. I used to teach the hero's journey for many years actually, and for the last 2 years, 3 years, I've not taught it at all. Right. So I've removed it from my, because I realized that it's fun. It's great fun because we talk about movie stories and we get people to work on analyzing a movie story to say that how which part of the hero's journey is on which one. They enjoy it, but at the end of the day, it's too big of a leap or a bridge for them to cross to say that Star Wars or Lagan versus my pitch and my story, right? So I've removed that complexity of the more involved hero's journey for the simplicity of 139 story is fine. And as Frank Duckworth said, yeah, maybe some nuance gets lost, but it's not necessary for the audience that I'm dealing with, right? And I've actually replaced it with something which, if you look at the bones of it, it will somewhere be the like the hero's journey only, right? Everything at the end of the day is very, very connected and similar, and it's kind of the problem solution thing only. So maybe I'll explain it. It's a chapter which should have been there in the book, but it's not there because I had to somewhere cut it. So the framework, I call it as SPARC, SPARC, and yeah, it's similar to something known as SEQA and SPAR, like different variants of that. But this is my variant of it. So what does SPARC stand for? So S stand for the situation or the what was happening before some problem came, right? So the example that you took was of a person who wanted to build some app or some proposal, right? Internal.
Yeah,
Let's take
increase budget for my team.
for your team, right? So now what does your team do? Let's take it as a case study.
So let's go with customer support, right? So I have
Customer
a
support.
customer support team.
Right. So now customer support team, right? So now the situation here might be that what is the story before? So say, hey, we have been having a team of 5 people support incoming load, call load of whatever, let's say 500 calls per week, right? It's a random number. And so that's been going on for the last, let's say 2 years, 3 years. That's the situation. The problem is basically you start with a trigger and say, but in the last 3 months, ever since we launched variant 2 of our product, the call volumes have gone up significantly, right? I'm using norm variance here to show that it's really gone up. Two, that result is resulting in a significant increase in my waiting time for the customers. So they're having to wait more. And three, it is also increasing the unresolved comments or something, right? So some statistics or symptoms to indicate that, hey, this is actually causing us harm, right? And that's you're trying to make this pitch to so the pitch is not, please help me increase my budget. The pitch is, please let us give a better experience for our customers. So using a lot of norm invariants, we are trying to make the case that we are suffering. Then now the audience should at this stage be acknowledging, nodding their head saying, yes, Harish, we agree there is a problem. What's next? The A is your answer, which is your solution, right? And you say, okay, I'm not saying that volumes have doubled, so double our team. I'm saying let's hire one more person or two more people and use a mix of this Gen AI tool or whatever, right? So you come up with your proposal for the revised way of managing it. And that should have enough amount of detail about saying how will it work and what will be the process, what will be the new way of doing things. And also say, by doing this, here are the 3 business benefits that we will realize, right? We'll have lesser, we are likely to see a fall in waiting time from X to Y.
Right.
We are likely to see improvement in this, blah, blah, blah. So the audience gets to see the benefit. And you might think, that's it, right? My story is done. I've got the situation from my answer. No. Anytime you are adding or proposing something new, the audience is always worried about saying what could go wrong. What obstacles will you face on the way? So don't let them come up with that and be unprepared. Preempt those questions by being prepared. So the R and C in this are the risks or the issues and the countermeasures. So a risk might be that, oh, we have to hire one new person and use Gen AI. That means I have to now train my existing people on this new tool. Can I do that? Will they be able to manage that? Hey, don't worry. I have done this in some other project and it worked well, or, here's how we'll mitigate it. Two, when we are doing it, we have a budget constraint from last year. How do we do that? Hey, don't worry. There is some extra money left from R&D or from learning. We can, put that here. So essentially, you are trying to preempt any worries, concerns, risks that your audience might have and trying to answer that, right? So I've been teaching this instead of the hero's journey for a long time now, and I can see that people can immediately, it fits more better, almost like a glove, not 100%, but almost like a glove for real life business use cases, right? So long-winded answer to your question, but so yeah, I've let go of some of these cool storytelling techniques like hero's journey to say that it sounds great, but the practical utility of it is probably not very high, versus something which sounds less cool, but it has more real life relevance.
Yeah, fantastic, Ravi. I think I should have attended your workshop earlier. I'll tell you why. Because around maybe 18, 19 years ago, I had attended a sales workshop in the US. And there somebody had come and spoken about sitemap, where they said situation, complication, implication, what is your position, that this is what I say, what is the action that I expect from you, and what are the benefits. And I used to always feel there is something missing. But now when you've spoken about, what are the guardrails that you have to, look at and preempting those questions, I think that completes the story. So now your SPARC, right?
Yeah.
SPARC is like way better version than sitemap for me. I'd been defaulting to sitemap earlier. Now I'm going to default to this. Thanks.
And no, thank you. And look, that's the thing, right? When you said implications, like, yes, of course, that needs to be there. And I actually talk about that sometimes. In the problem, I include that. But it's very difficult to make something which is messy and also keep it elegant, right? So I can add more acronyms, more letters to that thing, but it'll become unnecessarily complicated, right?
Yeah. Ravi, I've been also following your newsletter, and now you've got how many editions? 150 plus?
About 135 or something. Let me check.
135?
Yeah.
Wow, fantastic. So you've been sending this 3 to 1. That's the name of the
Correct.
newsletter, right? So tell me the process of putting that together every week. Is it like, you keep reading stuff and you say, oh, this is a good story, I should share this? And have you tried to sort of, pick some of these favorite people that that, in their content, I will definitely find a good, story that I can use? Because sometimes you're also under pressure, right? That you need to send out that newsletter. I haven't come across something. Maybe you're traveling, maybe you're going out somewhere. You haven't had time to consume so much content. So how do you manage that, having done this so consistently?
Yeah, no, that's a good one, right? I mean, for those who are not aware of the newsletter, it's called 3 to 1 because I share 3 tweets, 2 articles, and one long form content, usually a podcast episode. And the idea is that I'm consuming more than that, which is how I'm able to, filter it out to those 6. And usually tweets is not a problem because I spend inordinate amount of time on Twitter, on X. I should reduce that probably. So that usually is not an issue. The articles can sometimes become a challenge. Yeah, I agree with you, right? And sometimes I don't necessarily have something new and good. So there are 2, 3 places that I keep going back to if I'm kind of lost. So one is I'm part of this group called the Clear Writing Community by Amit Verma. And so there are some 2, 3 guys who write really well there. So I'll go back and look at what a Sarthak Dev has written, what a Rohan Banerjee has written, or something like that. The other one is I've got some subscriptions to newsletters that write well. So there's this lady called Anne Handley. She writes well. Lenny Ratchetsky writes really well. So somewhere I might find there. And nowadays I don't restrict to an article. It might be a long post on X. It might be something interesting on LinkedIn. This time I think probably using some video I found somewhere. So I'm also not keeping it, chained to the fact that it has to be a written text article, right? So I keep that open. And the podcast can sometimes be tricky. Sometimes I may not have heard something. So, which is where I have some old episodes that I've heard, which is like a backup, right? And then I might use that one for 1 week where I've not heard something fresh. And then that means now that I need to replenish that with something new, which can be good. But yeah, so that it can sometimes tend to be good. And in holidays, I've tended to do this that because I may not be listening to something new, I just share something I experienced in the holiday itself. So once we were in Bali and I had nothing new to listen to, but I just shared some experiences of being in Bali and how I used GenAI to do some research on that. So something basically. The idea is that, the core theme I'm trying to pull through all of this is that good examples of storytelling across, good examples of communication. And but I hope I'm able to continue doing that going forward.
Right. And then good examples of stories are all around you. I remember, the stories that you wrote about, what your father told in your temple run earlier this year, right? So again, those stories are just there all around you. You just need to spot them and put them together somewhere.
So well said. Yeah, stories happen to all of us, right? We have to slowly develop that muscle of being able to spot those, and then of course sharing those.
Yeah, yeah. And you mentioned something interesting, there about how you use GenAI, right? So two-layered question here. One is that how are you using GenAI in whatever you are doing? The second part that I want you to think about while you answer the first question, right? When you spoke about how you started off with your storytelling journey in 2015, you basically said that there is a teachable, algorithm to storytelling that I have been using. So I want more people to write these stories so that I don't become the bottleneck. So there is a science to it. Of course, there is an art to it. So does that then mean that Gen AI, with the right kind of training, will be able to spot and write the right kind of stories? Have you been seeing that already? What has been your experience? So intertwine both of these questions for your answer, please.
No, it's a tough one, Harish. I don't think I've got full clarity on this yet. It's still evolving so fast. So I'm at some level like a pendulum, I think. On one end of the pendulum, I keep thinking, I'm dead. My job is gone. Like, there's no way. Why would people lead me when GenAI can do so well? On the other end of the pendulum, I feel, no, I'm safe because to be able to use this skill, you need to know enough of it, have enough of a good taste in storytelling. To use a good co-pilot, you should have good piloting skills yourself and so on, right? So maybe the answer is in the middle. I don't know, right? So in terms of how I use it myself, I'm not a power user at all. I feel a lot of FOMO, a lot of anxiety, insecurity when I see others use it so well, right? And I'm part of some WhatsApp groups where people share what they do. Oh my God, I feel like, oh my, you guys are doing too much. Wait, stop, right? So that my son uses it like far more than I do. And so I think the quick answer to how I use it, I try not to use it in areas where I have some natural strength, but where I don't know or where I can use external help, that's where I use it. So if I have to write a LinkedIn post, like zero AI use. I don't think there is, I feel it spoils my writing. If I, take a first draft from AI or whatever, it's the worst thing to do. I think when, especially those who like to write and like to have their own voice come out, please do not use AI to just outsource everything. The first draft should be yours always, and you can use it to polish here and there. But like there for sure no. Um, but then where I've been using it is for research. Right in the book, for example, I wanted good examples of storytelling, and the advantage for the book for me was it's not that I wrote the book in the last 1.5 years, but I've not researched just in the last 1.5 years. I've been researching about storytelling for the last 9.5 years, right? So I've had examples from all these years. So I've been structuring and putting them on the right bucket, saying, oh, this is norm variance, or this is contrast, or that is mystery, that is humor, and so on. But I might, for example, in humor, I was like, oh, I need more examples of leaders using humor in the workplace, right? So I would ask ChatGPT for that. And it is good, but it is super scary also because it hallucinates like crazy, right? So there have been so many examples where it would confidently say, this person said this in this conference. Acha, give me the exact link. Here is the exact link. Go and check it out for yourself. Completely false, not there. And I've kind of gone through a 45-minute video saying, Kaha, when, where is he saying that first thing? He's not saying that at all. So super scary. But on the other hand, it did help. So when I asked for some like good quotes, it helped. On analogies somewhere here and there, it helped. Right. So research, it's been a good tool, but you have to like really check it. Like be super crazy. The CA auditor in me had to be very alive for that. Um, the other thing that it's been interesting for me is to craft interesting examples or use cases, right? So I'll give you yesterday's examples. Yesterday, as I mentioned, I was doing a storytelling workshop for doctors, right? So now the story principles I know, right? Maybe a story principle for me is analogies. How do you use analogies to explain ideas better? So now, earlier, 3 years back, I would have to generate analogies on my own in medicine. So, and that is not easy for me because I'm not a medical professional. Now, ChatGPT. So, all I have to do is to use some interesting terms, right? So, I put down saying, so the in analogies, the way I teach is use the simple term ELI5. So many people don't know ELI5. It's explained like I'm 5, right? So it simplifies it very quickly. So I'll say ELI5 sitagliptin to me. So what is sitagliptin? It's a molecule that people take, especially who are diabetic. Or ELI5 metoprolol for me. It's for blood pressure patients. And medical professionals, pharma leaders themselves get surprised when they see how smartly ChatGPT gives analogies. Like, oh, that's so much better. Oh, metoprolol is nothing but, it's like a brake when your heart is racing too fast. The accelerator of your heart is going too fast. Maybe I can use it when I share it with a patient, right? So now when I have to deal with different audiences, maybe tomorrow I'm going to teach teachers, maybe next year I'm going to be teaching scientists. The principles of storytelling I have, the 31 principles, but to make it relevant for them, I can use AI to generate use cases, right? You generate examples to make it more relevant. So these are some of the areas in which I'm using it, but I'm definitely not a power user. I think more, at the margin kind of a user, right? So that's how I'm kind of doing it. Sorry, what was your second question, Harish?
So the second question was, if AI is able to
Yeah.
learn from this as a science, then does
Can
that
we?
mean
Can we?
that there
Yeah.
is
Yeah.
yeah
Yeah, look, I mean, people still want to hear other people, right? There is a nice a podcast episode featuring Derek Thompson and Cal Newport, the deep work guy, on how in colleges especially the younger people are using AI to do their summaries, to do their assignments and everything. And so one thing that colleges are now increasingly doing is to get the people to not do written exams. Of course, that is also there, but come and defend your thesis, come and talk, present your work, right? That means you have to really understand what you have done and really know that. And so that's what is there even in a workplace, right? You can use AI to generate some good stories and good examples and etc. But both pre the AI work and post AI work, your storytelling techniques have to go up, right? So pre AI, you can't just tell AI that, hey, look at this data and create a presentation for me, create a good storytelling presentation for me. That is vague. That doesn't tell you much. Instead, I may have to use more specific prompts that I need to make a pitch for increasing my team for the customer service efforts for our customers. And can you apply norm variance and tell me where are we struggling in terms of the customer complaints? Here is some data. Right now, that is better. Okay, can you look at my customer transcripts and come up with a good anecdotal example of where a customer was really upset? Right. So now I'm using these terms because I know that these are storytelling techniques. So to generate good content from AI, I think you have to improve your taste. You have to become a good pilot to fly with that co-pilot, and so the quality of your stories will improve. And then post, right, once you have generated all of this, it's also how well are you able to then deliver that. For that, you should be able to know, okay, here is a good curiosity question that I can ask it. I can wait, I can pause, wait for the response, I can use this mystery here, and so on and so forth, right? So the word that I added in the subtitle of the book, which I realized was important, was timeless. Because storytelling has been with us, Harish, for 100,000 years, probably more, right? We've been spoken word is about 100,000 years old. Art is about 30,000 years old. Written word is about 5,000 years old. And now, after like 3000 or 2000 BC is when the first writing happened. Then we had, paper was invented in China about 100 CE, printing press 1400s. What comes after that? Then telegraph at about 1800s, then telephone. Then now in the last 50 odd years, you've seen like crazy amount of, we've got the internet and smartphones and social media and now AI. So the pace of change of technology of communication is of course changing, but communication has been around and stories have been around since before. We were miming stories before, we were telling stories, we were drawing stories, we were writing stories, and we have. So the principles of saying, hey, if I need to hold your attention, I'll have to use some mystery, I have to use some what's in it for you. And so those are the same, right? So the person in me who feels that storytelling will survive or will need to be learned even in an age of AI, kind of feels that these techniques or these principles have been around since 100,000 years. They will survive this AI wave also. And yes, AI can naturally do this really well. But if you learn these techniques, you'll become much better at generating better output from AI.
Right. Yeah. So you mentioned about, your research for the last 9.5 years. So do you have this mega database where you have multiple stories tagged and all of that? Is that the database that everyone should be looking for and stealing from you?
Yeah, that is one Google sheet that is there. Yeah. So in fact, I've not added to that in quite some time because once the book was done, I was like, now I can relax, right? So I did have a bunch of about 500 or so examples collected over many years, right? And I think just collecting is not good enough. So the analogy that I use sometimes is that you are like a person roaming around in the Himalayas and you're looking for exotic herbs and spices and plants and flowers and whatever, right? And you might come across something interesting, but you can't just dump it into a bag, and you can't have a bag filled with 500 different things which later you can't search, right? So you also have to have containers in that bag to say that this I will put in this container, this I'll put in that container, and then those containers should have bigger overall containers and so on, right? So that structure, I took some time, but I kind of developed a good sense of it in 2022. So in the last 3 years, I think my pace of collecting went up. And in the last 1 year, though, I was deliberately looking. So I would actually, as part of the research for the book, I started reading good non-fiction books, good biographies, good examples of storytelling all across, and then trying to then say, this was a good one. So, for example, I read Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, right? And then said, this is a great example of Wifu. So let me put that in that tag. Let me tag it and put it there, right? So then when I was writing that chapter, all I had to do was filter out that tag, and essentially like 31 chapters are there. I had more than 31 tags. I had 50 odd tags, and I left out some which I felt were not chapter worthy. And so then I knew that in this chapter, in analogies chapter, I've got 15 examples already. So let me filter from these and say, this is not so relevant. This is good. Here is a flow and so on, right? So the writing process was relatively, like, writing is always can be challenging, but I really enjoyed it because I'd had the brought the material in place, and then it was just a matter of connecting, saying we start from here, then we can build this here and this and so on.
Right. So Hanuman would, I think, differ from you, where he would say, no, I don't care about this specific herbs. I'm going to just take the whole
Get the
mountain.
entire mountain. Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. So I was just trying to visualize your sheet, Ravi, and that brings me to my next question, which is also related to what you said earlier when you spoke about AI and you spoke about where not to use AI.
Yeah.
So similarly, do you have a tab in your sheet or a column in your sheet when you say this is a great storytelling technique, but not to be used in real life because this can actually be counterintuitive or not an ethical use of storytelling by leaders if they're just trying to sugarcoat something too much or something like is there an ethical angle to storytelling as well?
Yeah. So now, yes, there is. Of course, there is, right? And the way I kind of look at it is that to me, being authentic, being real, being ethical is also a storytelling technique. So I sometimes not disagree, but I would not agree when somebody says, "Hey, don't tell a story when you have bad news or when in this situation," right? Yeah, don't tell a story, but use the right storytelling technique, and that technique might be to admit your mistake, and the technique might be that to tell that, "Hey guys, we screwed up here," right? So that is also to me a storytelling technique, right? And authenticity and integrity. So I have a chapter on saying how do you build. I have a section saying how do you build trust with the audience, right? And integrity is one chapter on that, and that means that sometimes you may have to admit to something that you did wrong, and hopefully it doesn't happen too often. So you actually build trust in a moment like that, and later when something good happens, people are more likely to believe you. Of course, you should not oversell, right? And do not try and say that, yeah, I've got a product in which 90% people are complaining, but I've got 10 people who are liking it. So let me take one lovely story from that 10 and then tell that story saying, oh, look at this beautiful customer story, right? That's disingenuous, right? There are too many of 90 dissatisfied customers. It'll come out and you will lose overall because your trust will go down.
Right. So when somebody comes to you saying, I want help with writing this story, right? Do you actually try to understand that person's motives? Is he just trying to pick one of those 10 odd stories that you just gave the example of? And, so is there a way that you try to, sort of protect yourself, not just from a legal or consequential point of view, but that's not something that you want to do. So how do you do that?
So thankfully, I don't have too many such experiences because I don't do too much story coaching, consulting as much as I do teaching, right? So in teaching, my typical audiences are, corporate leaders and non-profit leaders, and majority of the time, these are people who do hard work and don't tell a good story of it, right? So that's a standard thing. Don't come across too many people who are the quote unquote the smooth talkers or who have very little substance and then you're trying to tell a big story out of it. But having said that, I do come across some people who would be like, "Hey Ravi, my nonprofit is 6 months old and we just started, and what can we do to tell a good story?" And then I tell them, maybe you don't, right? You don't have a good story yet, right? So right now, all you can do is talk about your past credentials. Maybe you can talk about what is your plan and how sincere you are in the work that you're doing. And The advice that I give to people is if you don't have a good story, quote unquote, don't make a good story. Don't try to tell a big story. That means if you don't have great achievements, then try to just tell people that it's fine. Right now, we are still in the build out phase, right? And even in a corporate context, right? Sometimes people tell me, hey, Ravi, how do I apply this for a weekly call? I would say don't actually bother too much on applying this for a weekly call because these techniques are powerful tools. They're like strong hammers or strong. Yeah, you should not use this for some small thing in a weekly call where hardly any progress has been made. Use it for quarterly meetings. Use it for big situations where a lot of progress has been made. It's a big ask that you have, and that's where the audience will also feel that, this is worth it. I think that that's a skill that is important to also realize that, when do you know that you have something worth telling? Most people err on the side of that they have something worth telling, but they don't say it. So you should avoid both.
Right, right. And looking back at your own journey of being a storyteller, what has changed? What has evolved? What have you changed your mind about? Like you mentioned that, hero's journey was something that you talked about earlier. Now you shaved it off your curriculum. So what has changed and how have you evolved as a storyteller and a person teaching storytelling?
Yeah, I think the less is more has been a big one. I think the other thing that has evolved over time is that I think earlier I used to be a little more over reliant on data. This cliched adage, right? That in God we trust, all others bring data, and I realized over time that yeah, it's a data is important. I'm not saying you have to throw out data and only rely on anecdote, but it has its limitations. So you should keep that in mind and not be like, hey, as long as I'm giving all the evidence, that's it. People will be blown away and they will always do what is required of them. Sometimes just a rousing speech without any data can move people. There's the example that's quickly coming to mind is again Phil Knight from Nike, right? In his book Shoe Dog. This is where they were selling shoes of a Japanese brand called Onitsuka in the US. They were the sole distributor agents in America, and they were growing really well. They're doing well, but what had happened was that Onitsuka was going with other partners, and these guys had started Nike as a brand of their own, and there was a lot of animosity between the two. And Onitsuka had basically come down to firing Nike and also suing them. So they were in like really down in the dumps. And all of these guys had gathered together, Phil Knight and his leadership team, and they were all thinking this is early 1970s, and the war was on, gas prices were high, so general unemployment was high, a lot of doom and gloom in the room. And the way Phil Knight rouses his team is not by saying that, hey guys, here I've done the math, don't worry, we will do well, right? So he gave them a very rousing emotional speech saying that we finally are where we need to be right now. How often has it been that we have been disappointed with how Onitsuka has been screwing up our designs? How often have they delayed our shipments? How often have they not listened to what we want? Finally, this is our moment of independence, right? So he kind of gave a rousing speech, and that did the trick. That worked in people turning, and then suddenly they got energized and they started figuring out how do they build their own systems, their own manufacturing connections in China and Japan, and they became much 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 larger than Onitsuka, right? So yeah, I think that's one thing that I've changed my mind on, that yeah, data is important, but often sometimes without data a trick can work better.
That also reminds me about what Ashwath Damodaran wrote, right? His book. So he talks about how he would focus only on numbers for a
Numbers,
very
yeah.
long time, and how he missed out on the stories, the anecdotes, and how it has to be a combination of both anecdotes, the storytelling, and the numbers. I mean, coming from Ashwath Damodaran, I think that's like
Yeah, 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 yeah.
as important as it can get.
No, he's incredible. Yeah, Ashwath Damodaran is one of those, and he's a big user of 139 when I've seen his work. So I'm a big fan. Like he's a very structured, left brain, methodical thinker, communicator, and yeah, so huge respect to what he does.
Right. And you've spoken about how it has evolved, how the journey has changed you. Uh, would you have any idea of where you would want to go in this journey? What's the future looking like? Or what would you want it to be like?
So the song that comes to my mind in this case is with Jagjit Singh's song Hazaro Khwaishein Aisi, right? कि हर ख्वाहिश पे दम निकले. There's so many avenues that I want to explore in this, in this world of storytelling, and there's like very little time I feel. So I'm very impatient and constantly dissatisfied, happy, content, but dissatisfied that there's more to do. So one of the things that you and I are involved with as this avenue of storytelling for me is the Pune Knowledge on Tap series, where we get people to come and share good examples of storytelling. I want to be able to help scientists and economists and people who are public intellectuals craft better stories, right? Because the world deserves better stories from our public intellectuals. I want to be able to help people who are giving important speeches and sharpen their story. So anything which is a high stakes moment and a good story needs to be told, I'd love to be there in the room and helping them shape that narrative. So if anybody's listening out there, let me try and make that happen. And there is of course the training part that is happening, and there also there is so much more that I feel that can be done to work with leaders. I even now when I hear some very senior leaders talk in very important forums, I feel so much missed opportunities in storytelling. So there is a cricket anecdote where Sehwag is watching people play in the ground, and I think there's Ganguly and some other batsmen who are batting, and Sehwag is either gotten out or he's not yet come out to play, and he's watching the others play, right? And it's a test match, and people are playing slowly. So Ganguly, hits and doesn't take a single, or the next ball hits a single, and whatever, right? And Sehwag is looking and he's saying chauka, which means a four, chakka, six. And the other person sitting next to him saying, "Nahi, he didn't hit a four. He just hit a single. Why are you saying that?" He's saying, "Magar ho sakta tha. It could have been a four. It could have been a six, right?" So he's able to see that that ball could have been hit for a four or a six. And when I see leaders communicate, I can see that all the time. You could have used analogy here. You could have used surprise here. You could have used mystery here. You just let it go, right? And it at some level, it sometimes can be a bad thing, Harish, because I cringe when I see bad storytelling, and I can't face this now. It's my standards are increased, so I'd rather watch something else than listen to a person who may be technically brilliant but is doing a complete hash of the story, right? So I feel life is too short. I don't want to be wasting time. So yeah, I think multiple things that can be done for leaders, for public intellectuals. Everybody should, I think, learn this skill with or without Gen AI, and as much as I can do. Right now, I'm kind of struggling being a company and a team of one. So the other hope, prayer, and desire is to also increase the team somewhat. No specific ideas there, but yeah, there's a desire at least. Let me try and manifest that also. Hopefully, if you speak to me after a year, this won't be just a one-person company.
Oh, great. Fantastic, Ravi. It's really looking forward to that. So we'll bring this conversation to an end, but before we go, I'm going to pose some, questions to you, right? So one app that you swear by, you can't live without.
Oh my God, so many apps which are there. X is unfortunately my addiction. WhatsApp, but let me tell you one for storytelling that I use, which has been really useful, which is Evernote. So between Evernote and Google Sheets, and let me actually show you, since you asked about this, right? Let me see if I can show you my thing. I don't know whether this tab can work. So that sheet that we were talking about is actually
The
live.
mother sheet.
The mother sheet, yeah. So let me see if I can show that. Yeah, can you see this?
Yes, it's come up. Yeah.
Yeah. So basically, this was the sheet, right? So there's storytelling tool, maybe clear messages, content by. So this is not really a specific example, but this next one is an example, right? So Sequoia, the startup funding slowdown. I'd actually written a post about this. So some of my content also came from earlier posts that I'd written. So this did find its way into the book. Airbnb shareholder letter also found its way into the book, I think. This one, I don't think found its way. This did not find its way into the book. It's there somewhere in a section which is, ideas which I deleted out from the book and so on, right? These did not. So the blue is indicating that I've covered it. The non-blue is that, like, SPARC I've written here, but I did not put out anything there. So yeah, so this was the mother list, and then this was kitna, how much was it? About 300 odd ideas. But then I kept adding more. And then this is the final list, which is actually there in the book, which is that, which chapter, what story example, and so on. So yeah, these are some of the apps and the tools that one uses to make these things come out. Yeah.
Yeah. Hope you have multiple backups of this.
Yeah, I'm hoping that Google Sheet does a good job, but yeah, right now this is the one thing which is like.
Yeah, that's going to be the most important app to
That is good. That is true. Yeah.
keep it safe, right? Okay. One book that you re-gift most often.
So yeah, you mentioned Chip and Dan Heath, right? So Made to Stick has been that book for me that I've gifted. It's surprisingly not so well known, right? I mean, it came in 2008 or 9 or something, and it's still evergreen, still works. Yeah, I mean, it's gifted. It was gifted to be my ex-colleague called Rohit Desai, and I've gifted it, I think, the most to other people. Really, really powerful. Foundational book on storytelling. I've really taken a lot of inspiration from it, and in a way, this is like a tribute or a more nuanced or more detailed look at storytelling as compared to Made to Stick.
Okay. Slightly controversial. One book that you wish you could rewrite.
So many, but so this is also in a nice way, right? So look, I think pyramid principle is a foundational idea in storytelling. It's one of those where you feel you get it, but only when you really dig deep, you really get it. And I feel it could have been written better. I think Barbara Minto is a great thinker, was too much of a left brain thinker and did not really feel that I need to make it a little more lighter to read, a little more engaging to read. And maybe I think rewritten it would have done much better. But I think it's a very powerful idea.
Okay. And since we are in Pune, the city of illegal flexes, if you get to put up a flex billboard in every major city for one day, what 3 to 5 words will go on that flex?
The illegal flexes is so right. My God, it's crazy how much flexes that come up in the city. So look, the funny thing is that I've heard this question on a few other podcasts, right? And sometimes when you hear a question, you're like, oh, what would I answer to that question, right? So I've had one answer locked and loaded for a long time, and it's not, the answer is not for children. So please, if there are children watching this, do not. This is for adults. So the answer for me would be, and I boiled it down to five words, right? So my 5-word thing on a flex would be: life's short, have more beer. I completely agree saying that storytelling is all good, all things are right, but at the end of the day, for me, the joy and the fun comes with a group of friends and a glass of beer. But no, more seriously, for me, I've been giving this message in my book, right? So those who come to me for the book and to sign on the book, the message that I'm giving is make your stories rule. We all have great stories. We are doing great work. We are putting a lot of effort. We, our teams, etc. And it should not be that the quality of your work is right up there, but the storytelling your work is right here, right? And there should not be a big gap between the work and the story. And so you have to put that extra effort to make sure that your story does justice to the amount of work that you have done. And so that would be the real flex that I'll put on a board, that may your stories always rule.
Okay. And this one, before this question, I'm going to preface it with a story, right? So Sachin Tendulkar would always say that, see, I used to do very well outside, but as soon as I would enter the house, my father would say, you can be the greatest cricketer in the world, but here you're just Sachin, so just do the work or whatever, right? They would bring him down to earth. So you are like the Sachin Tendulkar of storytelling, but which of these techniques really work with your children?
None of them. So none of them, especially with my daughter Swara. Oh my God. So I keep telling that, I've done all this podcast, book, newsletter, so many people, subscribers. Anything I try with her, no way, it doesn't work at all. So if somebody has ideas, please give me. And some of them now also know, like Advait knows some of these things, or Pravina knows some of these things. And they can see it from a mile away, right? So if I ask them a question as a teaser question, they're like, I know, you're trying to use that curiosity. It's okay. Just tell the answer, right? So yeah, sometimes you need to be brought down to earth, I think, at home, and they do a really good job of it.
So अभी भी दिल्ली दूर है, lot more for you to learn, and we're just hoping to follow in your footsteps and learn from you, vicarious learning from you then.
Thank you so much, Harish. Thank you.
Yeah. On that note, thanks a lot. It was fantastic as usual, and I don't think I'm done with this. I'm going to come back to you for another conversation pretty soon, and we're going to record one sometime soon in the future. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much, Harish. Look forward to that.